Happy to be here. It's been a decade. Life of a Mac admin. I feel like I'm not a Mac admin anymore, so I'm going to speak from old experience. But I feel like back in the day, you were that one person preventing a broken laptop from turning into someone's full-blown existential crisis. At least that's the way I remember it. Most of the time, though, it wasn't that glamorous, and it didn't feel that heroic, but you were the one turning panic into stability, and no one really saw the stack of skills that it takes to do that. This talk is going to be about that stack, and in my opinion, about becoming just dangerous enough at a whole bunch of things to pull off just about anything that you want. Before we get into it, a little bit about me if I haven't met you. My name is Diana. I am the co-founder of DownPay, which is a Shopify partial payments app. And before I get into all the work stuff, I myself, at my core, am a collector of hobbies and of skills. And it's not very uncommon for me to kind of pick up a new hobby every month or less than a month. I've made realistic flowers out of paper. I've launched a pottery store on Shopify after learning how to do pottery. I've fermented various things. Throughout my personal life, especially as a kid, I had this experimentation and hacker mindset with me. It was something that I embraced thoroughly. My dad, taught me how to fix my own car, fix my brakes, do hardwood floors, just kind of like pick up anything, experiment with no pressure. It just felt like the paths were endless, and why wouldn't I just try figuring it out myself? I don't know about you, though. My entire career felt the entire opposite. Very early, I was told to specialize, and specialize as soon as possible. That being a generalist and pursuing a variety of different interests was going to be a weakness and not a strength. I was told it would hold me back long term, that it would limit my options, and if I didn't sit down and focus on this one thing, the world would end. I guess I felt like I had to save all my experiments for my hobbies. And as this became drilled into my head, whenever new opportunities came around, these are the kinds of thoughts that I had. What if, I couldn't figure it out? I'd have to start from scratch and everything would be really scary, really difficult. These thoughts became so pervasive that all I could think about was, okay, let's just figure out the one next step in, this career path that I'm on, despite the fact that in my core, it didn't feel like the right move. I had a lot of uphill battles, a lot of them with myself, a lot of them with my managers. And it finally, dawned on me after a decade of feeling this way that experimentation can be a source of power and head starts are overrated. Now, I'm not saying that specialization doesn't matter. Specialists are absolutely critical. All I'm saying is take some time. There's range that can help specialists be stronger. And the best surgeons that you'll ever see are people who have spent a long time thinking and studying broadly before picking one pathway and going down it. The best IT admins that I've ever met weren't just experts in one system. They drew from different tools, different domains, different industries to become better at their craft. That's what experimentation gave me and why I changed my mindset, or I'm still working on it. Even with all those doubts running through my head, I've had a roller coaster of a career over the last couple decades. I've been pushed and pulled in directions I could have never predicted. Quick show of hands, how many of you are actually working in the field that you studied? There's like 5 people here. Yeah, it's not unexpected. We've all done a ton of pivots, and I'm excited to hear about some of the crazy ones. But I myself studied film. I was an audio engineer for many years before pivoting to IT, then security, then product management, then founding a company in e-com SaaS. What I didn't realize at the time, and while going through this journey, which is why I built a presentation around it, was that all these detours are actually building that mindset to be adaptable, and they were fitted to the most generalist career of all, a bootstrap founder. So what I want to do today is take that mindset and give it to you. By the end of this talk, I hope that you'll see that range and And side quest opportunities that you might have are really powerful, and that I hope you feel that you can use your own toolkits to basically just take on whatever comes next with curiosity instead of fear. In section 1, we're going to talk about going from an I to a T. Don't worry, I will explain what that means in a little bit. Then we're going to talk about side quests and how these detours and experiments don't have to distract from your career. They could potentially really level you up. And then the last section is just really bringing together all the exercises and your lived experience and putting you in the best place mentally. So let's dive in. I'm not going to quiz you on what IT stands for. That's not what this section's about. How many of you have heard of I-shaped people and T-shaped people, though? Is that a common, yeah, so the couple people know kind of what that is. But for the people that don't, basically you have different kinds of ways of acquiring and retaining skills, and they help you in your various careers. I-shaped people are very deep experts in one area, like the vertical line of an eye. T-shaped people are people who have similar depth, but also have a horizontal line that kind of crosses various domains. So kind of specialists versus generalists, pretty straightforward. But here's the thing, and it does take a little while to get, to become aware of this, that most of us are actually more T-shaped than we think we are, despite, believing we're such specialists in a domain. And in my experience, recognizing yourself as a T the first time can kind of feel like a breakthrough moment that makes every next step a lot easier. For me, it happened at my first major crossroad, leaving film and becoming an IT admin. At the time, I'm not going to lie, it felt like a downgrade. I was kind of leaving the sexy and wonderful world of film, and I had to face the fact that I wasn't going to become a super cool movie director. I had to get a stable job. I needed to not work till 3 a.m. every night. I needed reasonable things in my life at that moment, and sometimes pivots can be as simple as a need like that. But then, when the opportunity came up to join IT, the panic set in. I don't know the first thing about IT. I'm an I-type person, and my specialization is sound design. But the things that were pushing me for this role were way too important for me to kind of, step aside and let fear take the wheel. So I stepped outside my comfort zone, and I joined a small but mighty team at CTV, which is a Canadian television company, to just give it a shot. And every day I felt like an imposter, that I'd be found out, that the hiring manager was probably, wrong about me and to give me a chance. But I took it in strides. I figured out how to troubleshoot simple things. I asked a bunch of dumb questions as I kept going. And slowly but surely, something actually clicked for me. I have used all these skills before when I was endlessly troubleshooting alone on my night shifts as a sound engineer. I'd have to figure out why certain hardware wasn't talking to other hardware, why the frame rates weren't matching. Why do we still have different frame rates? It's really weird technical issues that I figured out myself. And I even remembered back in school, I was a teaching assistant teaching other people how to do this. Like, how were those things not in my mind as important transferable skills for this new IT career? And so, I had realized my I was a little T all along. And it wasn't really graceful to realize this the first time. But it's exactly that discomfort that really stretched me. Getting to the point of giving up is not uncommon when you try to expand beyond your depth. But like they say, the best things come from outside of your comfort zone, so you got to keep pushing through. And so I did for, many, many years. So far that it stretched me to Maxis Admin a decade ago, where I was here. There's a session that you can, watch from Andrina and I on APIs and SDKs, concepts I hadn't heard about back in the day. And now I've built an entire business on APIs I built at Shopify. So funny what happens when you take a stab at something new. And I'm sure many of you have similar stories, and I wanted to share, another inspirational one that I use all the time. I don't know if you've heard of her. Her name is Julia Child. She was famous for bringing French cooking to America with her book, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. That was back in the 60s. And she pivoted a lot, and some of it was, being pushed by valid, very real reasons. One of them being she pivoted from her journalism career during World War II to wanting to serve her country and do something that benefited the cause. And she wanted to join the military, but she was 6'2", so 188 centimeters. She was too tall for the military, so she ended up volunteering for the Office of Strategic Services, which was a precursor to the CIA. And she got to do really interesting projects like a shark repellent called Shark Sense, which was, she was experimenting and designing ways to prevent sharks from blowing up naval mines in the ocean. Very drastic pivot from journalism. She continued these projects during the war, and when the war ended, she ended up in France with her husband. And driven by boredom, she decided to take on a little side quest of her own. She enrolled in the prestigious Cordon Bleu Culinary School at age 37. Go big or go home. And on paper, pivoting to cooking from something like that is a very total hard reset. But it really wasn't. There's a ton of skills she built earlier, curiosity, that mindset for experimentation. They all converge into a new passion that you can, you don't have to start from scratch with. And that's what allowed her to not just cook, but to inspire a whole generation to, take this on. And, she's a very passionate, fearless woman, and she became a legend in one of my favorite hobbies. And her advice, the way I read it at least, is not just taking advice about cooking. I mean, do it for sure, experiment. But it's advice about just the way to learn and to be fearless, make mistakes, and above all, just have fun while you're doing it, because, what's the point if you're not? And so I really believe in pushing for experimentation for the sake of growth, even if you stumble along the way. And a way to kind of start doing this, at least, is just to build a bit of, mindfulness on, discovering what skills you actually have. So if you're kind of at a crossroads and wondering whether you should continue down your path, or you feel kind of a pull towards a new area, the first thing is just to pause and take inventory of what you have right now and what you can offer. Write down projects that you've worked on, the problems that you've solved that really drive you, and not just what your title says, but what are all the things that you did during that time. And what then you can do is match and translate those to different skills that potentially work across different domains. Or ask ChatGPT to do it for you, because it's way easier. For example, troubleshooting is where really you're understanding and learning structured problem solving, systems thinking, things that translate to any type of career. Writing internal documentation is all about communication and meeting people where they are and trying to make sure that it's approachable to everyone. Vendor management is all relationships, and those help literally everywhere. And so there's invariably a ton of skills that you might often overlook in your day-to-day if you don't just sit down once in a while and kind of take everything out of your toolbox and go through it. And this mental exercise, plus the last pivot I did from film, was really what helped me jump again. The move felt a little bit less scary. I knew going in that I was trying something new, and I didn't know where I'd end up, but that wasn't really a concern. The problem is, though, when you start doing these exercises, you kind of might become insufferable. And what I mean by that is you walk into this new field and you're like, I've got this. Like, my talents are limitless. I kind of, for me, I kind of did that when I pivoted to product. I had been a pseudo product manager in the IT security team, and we had launched a new login experience for all the Shopify merchants. So like millions of accounts being merged, doing all this thing. A project that had failed 3 times before me and my team had took it on. And I'm like, I got it. Like, I know what a product manager role is. And so from there, I was offered a proper product manager role on one of the core teams of the Shopify product. But I was starting as an apprentice, and it only took me a few months to become super frustrated and to feel like I'm going backwards and missing out on opportunities for progress. I know I did it for the right reasons. I wanted proper mentorship. I wanted to understand the end-to-end way of doing it, and product management was not a thing in the IT security team. But I was super frustrated that all these IT skills were actually just product skills with different labels. Troubleshooting was problem framing, documentation was road mapping. All these things were super similar, just rebranded. And I thought, like, why do I have to start over? The truth is, though, sometimes you can't avoid this. It's actually okay, and it's actually really valuable to take some of these moments for pause. And sometimes pivoting means doing the time, asking dumb questions, getting your hands dirty, and being the new kid without the ego. The upside is that when you combine that humility with the skills that you're carrying in, you end up accelerating way faster after that as well. The experience also showed me I had a ton of gaps that I had never explored. For example, external facing teams at Shopify, the deadlines are on another level. Learning how to navigate scope creep, to balance impact, quality, people's feelings, not to mention stakeholders, all of those skills were some of the longest to develop for me. But stretching was kind of where I picked up those power-ups, skills that were critical to me as a founder, especially bootstrapping my own company. And that kind of brings me to my next section, side quests. So now that we've kind of explored skill transfer, let's talk about when you step off that main storyline once in a while. In video games, side quests usually pop up as something small, like a problem that looks unrelated to your main mission. But when you follow them, there's usually characters that you bump into and tools that you pick up that only show their value later on. And sometimes it can be the exact thing that you need to beat the big boss later or to progress further in the story. In my opinion, careers kind of work the same way. Sometimes side quests or stepping off that main path sparks creativity and helps you tackle problems that everyone's ignored. It's very common to keep going and saying this is just the way things are when you don't try something new. And borrowing ideas from different domains can be super powerful when you come back into your own. Think about playing a role-playing game. If you only ever level up one skill, let's say fireball, you end up hitting a wall where a boss has a fire resistance and you're kind of stuck. But instead, if along the way you invested in some side quests that taught you alchemy, unlocked rare weapons, you decided to explore other skills, all of a sudden you have, built up a variety of strategies that you can try. And that's really the concept of analogical thinking. It's not just brute forcing your way through the same thing over and over again, trying to get past it. It's saying, what has worked in other contexts that I can borrow here? So take this generalist, for example. Her early life looked like a series of side quests. She danced and sang on stage. She acted in plays. She moved abroad as a journalist. She became a polyglot, I think, of 6 or 7 different languages everywhere she moved. And later, she threw herself into activism alongside Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Each of these side quests gave her the tools she could carry over into whatever comes next. Rhythm from music, storytelling from journalism, emotion from acting. She was extremely flexible and just followed paths that resonated. She treated each path as a source of analogy, ways of seeing and expressing the human experience. When she finally sat down to write, she could draw on a well of patterns from other domains that she had experienced. That's what gave her work its power and resonance. That generalist is Maya Angelou, a famous author, if you haven't heard of her, of over 30 books, a polyglot in 6 languages, and a civil rights activist with more than 50 honorary degrees. She's a striking example of breadth of skills feeding depth of skills. Those side quests didn't distract from her mission. They ultimately gave her the power to tell her story and, be remembered for the impact that she's had. And very similar to Julia Child, there's a really great concept of, thriving, not just surviving. She is she's a very huge advocate of just pursuing for the sake of, enjoyment. And I think that bringing that fearlessness into, your next step, I think is what's going to drive you into doing something that, you'll never regret not having tried. And there's like also a concept of design thinking called diverging and converging, which is used a ton in product management as well. And I think it kind of works well here, where you, in a product team, you would diverge and explore various ways to solve a problem and never get, kind of pigeonholed into one direction before you saw what was out there. And then at some point, something clicks, something makes the most sense for the team, the product, the problem that needs to be solved at the time, and you pick that path forward and build on top of it. For example, for me, had I not, said yes to that product manager little project, it's insane, during the IT team, my IT team time, I never would have thought, okay, this is actually a career that people do. This is super interesting, and I'm going to pursue it. And similar to that, I was an IT admin for many years, and focused a lot on learning Jamf. And by the end of my career in product, I actually ended up as a director of product at Jamf. So had I not known the product really well and had empathy for that, that wouldn't have been possible either. And I could have never predicted going back into IT in a specific way. And sometimes that perspective is going to help you realize that switching careers, is something that you really want based on a new discovery. Sometimes it's just inventing something new and, solving a stubborn problem that, you're stuck on, or finding a better way to do what you love. And this is, what I kind of call a sampling period. It's a very common, if you've read the book Range, which is a great book I recommend if you love these kinds of concepts I'm talking about. It's about treating side quests like little bite-sized, low-risk tests. And they give you a little bit of signal to determine whether a pathway is going to suit you or not. And so, micro projects, I had a friend who left data science and decided that he wanted to become a paramedic, which is a drastic shift. And he decided to interview, I think, 5 different paramedics to understand their day-to-day. And it turned out that it was really not, the pathway that was aligned to him. And what a great way to just kind of not have to spend all those years back in school to realize that. The goal of sampling is not mastery. It's, putting aside perfection and just getting a little bit of signal to see if something excites you, teaches you something new, and then sparks an idea that you can bring back or, pivot entirely. Example for me was, I ran my pottery store about 8 years ago. It was my first taste into running like a little business. And a valuable lesson I learned there was a lot about pricing for value. And if you have never worked in pricing, it is 75% psychology. So it's a really good lesson to learn so early on and to keep working on, like in my current company. And that's, like, in my opinion, the rhythm of a fulfilling career. You go on side quests, you end up getting a power-up, hopefully, and then, it changes your main path for the better. Of course, I can't not mention the story of Steve Jobs, because this is a perfect, scenario where he had left Reed College because he didn't know what he wanted to do. And he was wasting his parents' money at that time. They had saved up for him to take this one pathway and just study and figure it out. And he ended up leaving. And instead of just leaving and, sitting around doing nothing, he actually kept auditing courses that he just enjoyed for the sake of it, because you can just do that for free. And one of the courses was a calligraphy course. And he famously stated that, had he never dropped in on that class a decade before designing the Mac, it never would have had multiple typefaces. It's a great example of how inspiration from a side quest can really shape your path. So much so, that far in the future, you take advantage of those skills that you might have gathered early on. Sometimes, of course, it's not just inspiration that drives change. The world itself pushes you to pivot. And, I think we're all feeling that as well, as, AI is really becoming a thing. When that happens, though, the point of building Range is that you have all these skills and experiences that kick into overdrive. Which kind of brings me to the last, section of my talk. Every time that you add a skill, you follow a side quest, you build another set of T skills. The more you do this, the more you're just building yourself a little bridge. And that bridge is what makes pivots survivable, whether you choose them or whether you don't. You walk into a new situation with way more confidence because the new challenge is just taking advantage of a ton of analogical skills that you've already acquired. And in my opinion, IT admins are primed for this. We constantly are figuring out new things every day. That concept is a growth mindset. It's where you see your abilities as something that you build over time, shaped by effort, and where change is exciting instead of threatening. And every step forward or sideways is more of an experiment than a final destination. A fixed mindset, unlike that, assumes that abilities are just set at birth. You either have them or you don't. It's not a fun way of living. And research actually shows that children are actually more persistent when their parents model a growth mindset as well. And that research really resonates with me because it's really only now looking back that I can see how much of my own journey and the way I think, the way I build, the way I take risks connects back to the bridge that my dad built for us decades ago. And I'd like to share his story with you. Let me take you back to an earlier moment in time. It's 1985 and Romania is under a communist dictatorship. The leader at the time was inspired by North Korea, bold words, and he cut off the country from the rest of the world. Everything you did was tightly controlled. Fall out of line and you're arrested or you simply disappear. The people were on rations as well, so the world in Romania was entirely different than it is today. Western movies, music, books, they were all banned. And people were more isolated than ever from the rest of the world. I think they had 1 to 2 hours of propaganda on TV a day. Naturally, though, an underground movement began to form to bring back the things that were lost. Meet my dad, a rock and roller from his youth and a passionate member of this new movement. He grew up on Pink Floyd and American action movies, and he knew that people needed an outlet more than ever because he himself did too. And so with this spirit and his lived experience, he built a business. He had a custom-made backpack that held a CRT TV, a VCR, and bootlegged action movies, dubbed by one woman in Romania, which her story is amazing. And he would go to secret locations around Romania, collaborating with restaurants to have these screenings for all these movies. And he would stay all night, getting paid per screening. Of course, it didn't come without risk. There was secret police that was trying to break up these rings, which is crazy to think that they're watching Rambo First Blood and being, taken away by the police. But this was his pivot. It was a forced change built on a rebellion as a way forward, even when the world was pushing back. This went on for a very long time in Romania. It ended in 1989 when communism fell, but it was never the same again. And he knew that he had to make a big pivot for kind of our family to survive, and that was leaving Romania. And, this was probably what went through his head. I should probably ask him. I just made this slide. But in many ways, I think he was starting from zero, new country, new language, new culture. He left everything familiar behind. But he carried a ton of transferable skills with him. I mean, he survived that. I think a lot of things are easier. For him, he built those under the pressure of dictatorship, and for me, they're the bridge that I stand on today and why I don't see pivots as dead ends, but just as another step forward that I can figure out. And that's what helped me develop my hacker mindset. Because had my dad never pushed to leave, I never would have had the freedom to chase film and, be super creative and understand how that works. Had I not been pushed to wanting stability in my life, I never would have found IT, learned systems thinking, and met a lot of the incredible people in this room 10 years ago. Had I not been pushed away from being a software dev and wanting to see the 10,000 foot view and work at that level, I never would have found product management. And had I never been frustrated with politics and risk aversion at large companies, I probably never would have leaped to use my adaptability as a strength and build my own business. And so what I take from this is, meandering down that path isn't a perfect plan, and it never will be. It's about staying flexible. Each shift taught me how to adjust, improvise, and keep momentum even when the path is unclear. And this is just a snapshot of founder skills that I use on a day-to-day. You're constantly chasing the one highest impact thing that you can do and staying on top of trends. Moving fast enough to ship, to learn, and adjust course. Sometimes things are great and you're doubling down on something that's working, and other times you need to cut your losses and try a different path. And looking back, I realized something really important and something that I'm keep practicing and getting better at. It's asking these types of questions instead. And that shift is from fear to curiosity. It's what range and resilience and going on all those side quests is really all about. It's what turns every pivot into something that is exciting instead of terrifying. So some of you, I hope you'll use your side quests that you go on to go deeper into a specialty that you love. It's a more linear path, but it's also great. I'm not judging anyone. And then it's also possible that you may be inspired to reinvent yourself, not just once, but many times. Sometimes because the world pushes you, and sometimes because curiosity pulls you. It's never about abandoning depth. It's about unlocking new leverage points as you go. Both paths are extremely valid. What matters is that you treat these detours as something that you're building as a bridge for yourself, not just a waste of time. And so for me, I've done this crazy journey so far. Who knows if founder is my final chapter? I'd love to just garden one day and just do nothing, but we're not there yet. My future, though, isn't locked down. It's always writable, and I hope that you feel the same way. Thank you.